This is a little gift, a video for the TE 328 class Wednesday night. You know, I don't keep it long enough, so I feel so guilty. So I'm going to make you watch this video. I sent you the lesson. It's really kind of the lesson for next week, but it's a pre-lesson in that next week I'm going to talk about the the PSYOP book in 328. But I'm also going to I have the question here, do we have Valentine's Day party since it's 2 days early? We might have candy, you know. Who wants popcorn on Valentine's Day? But that's 2 weeks from now, by the way. So I'm talking about the 5th. So we'll have popcorn then. But I want you to do field visits, 5 or 6 hours of field visits. You can do them all in one day, or you can do them in a couple of 3-hour sessions. And I put a few things down on this sheet that's on Canvas. You can download it or look at it on there about ESL, and I got A through G on some questions, you know, how their program works. Do they mix ELs with regular classroom students? Do they have after or preschool programs that involve EL students? So you'll be talking to the ESL teacher, and I'm more interested in a good visit than I am in an interview. So I may look at that, but the visit is really important because I want you to get some kind of an aspect of apprenticeship. I would even be better if you could, on your own, if I wouldn't require it, but if you could spend 3 or 4 times in a program or several times in a program, because you get to feel for it, and that's how that works best. Okay, that being said, we'll look forward to doing something with that in the latter part of February. And when you do your visits, be sure, like TE100, wear your lanyard and dress appropriately. Okay, and I will work with you on placements, although I know several of you might know Ting and could go down to Central easily. I don't want you to just showing up at schools or, you know, like Lexington. Make some arrangement. If you don't know the people, you can't just show up, or even just contact them. It's best. I know the high school here, they're very picky about, you have to go through the assistant principal to be okay to visit a classroom. So, all right, now, I will make some copies for the PSYOP text. I know how you love to buy textbooks. So, we're going to talk about PSYOP on the 5th of February. But I wanted to take advantage of this and I have some speech in here, but I'm basically giving you what's written on here, is that the old grammar translation approach, and I've got a little series I call How ESL Has Been Taught, or how second languages, whatever they were, have been taught since ancient Egypt, which isn't too hard to speculate about, because we know that in ancient Egypt, they taught scribes, who were people that wrote things down. They were taught very strictly how to write and keep records. And so that's how they kept track of what the Pharaoh did or what the king of the Persians did, etc. There was a class of basically secretaries. They were always, I believe, always male. They were very rigidly trained. They had either clay or even wax tablets that they could mark in and then get their homework graded. They could rub it because paper wasn't readily available, or it was expensive, papyrus or any type of document to write on. So I call it also the rote memory. And amazingly, this thing still exists because you are taught that way sometimes, even in language classes in high school. You have people that do things that is kind of just memorized and you don't really use the language. It's all approached as a grammar instruction. In fact, even written English is often taught that way. But the clue to why that's no good is that you do not think in terms of slots and grammar and structure before you speak or even before you write. Writing and reading are skills that are in the moment. you have an idea and you cast about for some words and phrases. You don't sit around thinking, I need a noun, I need a subject, then I need a verb, I need an adverb. You don't think in abstract categories. So the teaching of grammar isn't after the fact. It would be like saying, I only know if I can breathe only if I've analyzed how the diaphragm and how the lungs work and things like that. You know, you could only drive a car if you understand how the car works. Most people drive a car, they have no idea what's going on under the hood. Or if they do, they let somebody else worry about it. You don't know how your computer works. You don't know the concept of directories, and a lot of these things are not taught. You know, back in the 70s, back in the 90s when people were using computers, I remember my sons had them. They actually learned A and B directories, and they learned how to save things, and they learned somewhat about coding and things like this. But nowadays, the software is done so you don't have to deal with the actual mechanics. You just deal with the program. So that's what grammar is. Grammar is the official outline analysis of our language or any language, and teaching grammar has nothing to do with being a good writer. So we'll just leave it at that. All right, so the question is there any value in teaching grammar? And I say there is, but not for most people. So I've got some videos on here. You can see them. There's a little bit from the Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams. There's a little clip in there of a Latin class. The guy's teaching them the word agriculture, agricola, agricole, agricolas, and they're repeating it sing-song fashion. But that's conjugation, same thing. Tu eres, es, somos, son. I mentioned this in class. You know, when you're learning Spanish or French, they have you conjugate, and you do individual words with the form and what the sound is, but you really don't use them in sentences, so they don't have much value, you know. Then there's a Spanish class example, and then I have a class from Pakistan, kind of a video where the guy's teaching English grammar to speakers of Urdu. Urdu is the language of the people of Pakistan. It's not Arabic. And so they speak Urdu, and so therefore the language, they teach the grammar of English. And that's very traditional. It goes back to the Middle Ages. They used to teach the grammar of Latin and of Greek, and because people in the church and learned people, if you were educated, you knew your Greek and your Latin. We don't teach those languages anymore. What are the advantages and disadvantages? Well, first I want to talk about the advantages. Certain individuals like to study the structure of a language and have the ability to focus on that. And it's kind of like people that like to study the anatomy of a frog and enjoy dissecting animals or enjoy analyzing how a car works. They get pleasure from that. But that's a relatively small percentage of people, and mostly they're more educated people. People that are really very analytical and tend to be maybe a little smarter, or at least think they are. And they enjoy that. And they want to see how it's built, you know. Most people like a house. They don't care about how it's built. They just know they like the house. So what are the advantages? Well, I put down some things that it is useful for people in literature or advanced, like really study languages intensely, to be better and better at it, or to translate. Those of you who are translators or want to be translators in the Spanish translation program here at UNK, it's useful to know grammar because it's important. Legal aspects, if you're translating for somebody and it really matters, like in court, it's important to have the right verb tense. It's important to have the right expression. Otherwise, you give the wrong impression. It can help you learn another language. It's often used with people that are very analytical but don't know languages very well. So you just teach them the map of the language. That's what grammar is. It's very easy to use the grammar method or grammar translation method for people that really aren't teachers. They can study the structure of a language, and maybe they speak some Spanish or French, and they can say, oh, this is how you make a proper, I call it book French or book Spanish, formal. And to some extent, you can teach people. For instance, if we were going to we're going to send you on a mission trip or for the military or church or whatever, and you had to know some phrases, you had to know something about the structure of the language. Like, not all languages have the subject, verb, and object. Like, I see the dog. Some don't even have the I, it's in the verb. Like in Spanish, I see, yo veo el perro, I see the dog, but I don't say I just say veo, because in Spanish, the subject's understood. It's part of the verb. The verb form has the I in it. And you have to teach that to people, or otherwise they always want to say yo, yo, yo. Okay. Now, so that method is useful. So I might want to teach you the structure, and because people like to do comparison, their language to the other language. It's interesting for people that are really going to be using the language. And so that is useful. Now, if I want you to be conversational in the language, I will not spend a lot of time on that, because I don't want you to stop and think. I want you to automatically use the language. You might use the audio-lingual approach, or you might just have people rehearse things, but within context, not just memorize phrases, but use them and apply them. Like, oh, how are you? I am fine. And you learn that expression and get used to it, and you listen to it a lot, and you kind of embed it after so many repetitions. Grammar translation is not particularly good at that. Now, what are the disadvantages? Well, there are many. And unfortunately, we use grammar translation is often used to teach in places where the language, secondary language instruction in Spanish, or even English, hell, it doesn't matter. If it's done poorly, it's probably grammar translation. Little interaction between the students, and not too much between the students and the teacher, because they're all busy looking at the board and writing down words. And they pronounce the words, but they don't spend a lot of time on it. There's no or almost no emphasis on usefulness of it. Okay, now some people teach the grammar and they also teach with the other aspects. So obviously I don't mean grammar translation is always taught badly, but it's often taught badly. Finally, something I think is a disadvantage of people that use it, maybe they know English grammar and they think they can just impose that on the other language. The rules, the grammar, which is the rules of the structure of the language, the formation of conjugation of the verbs, the words, the location of the words, the nouns in the sentences, or the way the questions are formed. People, they don't have very much they don't really know a lot about other languages. So that makes it even worse. So there's a lot of disadvantage and relatively few advantages. People that become Spanish teachers or French teachers, or really learn the language and deeper and deeper and deeper, then there is a fair amount of advantage to learning grammar. But for introducing people, getting them excited about a language, especially you're dealing with ESL kids, grammar concepts don't work because young kids don't even know what you're talking about. They got to deal with the here and now. You tell somebody that eso es un manzana, this is an apple, they want to see the apple. And then I'd say, voy a comer, I'm going to eat the apple. And then I would say, yo como yo tengo hambre, I'm hungry. And I have all the words in a little structure, and then I start eating the apple, right? Manzana. It's magical. So I've given you some videos you can look at. a few of you will find grammar useful, but you remember you can't teach with it. You got to make the language a living thing. You got to make it exciting, you know. That'd be like a comic telling jokes and then explaining why they're funny. All right, that wouldn't really work. It's got to work in the moment, or it's no good, you know. My question to you is: would teaching English to ELLs in America benefit from grammar translation method? Now, I'm going to let you think about that. I may put that as a discussion question this week. Would this method be useful at all teaching English? I want you guys to think. That's why we have our conversation in class. You know, we can be very loud and stuff. Okay, well, I hope you enjoy it. And I know this is probably longer than it should have been. But I will make popcorn next week. And you can't eat the apple online. Did you know that? Thank you. All right.